So I'm thrilled to introduce you to North, which is another mouthful, I think, Erin. So it's the Northern Ontario School of Medicine Research Toward Health Hub. And it's one of the research networks that lives in the Center for Social Accountability, as Erin mentioned. And I'm a rural generalist family doctor, and I've been the physician lead for the network and had the great privilege of being able to actually create this network along with Dr. Brianne Wood, who's our director. Or rather, Sridhar Acharya is a doctoral candidate, and he's our data analyst that we've been able to hire. So that's the team we have working, and we're actively expanding on the team that we have working with us. So I just want to start by a brief introduction into what a practice-based research and learning network is. So it's essentially what it is it's a database, as Erin had mentioned, of de-identified primary care patient data. And so the concept is sort of that theory of moving away from the traditional research institutes based in hospitals and universities and really bringing it back into the community. And so that really speaks to the community pillar of the Center for Social Accountability. And so the way the Practice-Based Research and Learning Network operates is that physicians, family physicians and nurse practitioners consent to participate in this network and include their patient EMR data as part of the network, and then have that database accessible for purposes of research as well as quality improvement that's really founded in questions that are initiated from that community or practice perspective. And then I'm going to have Brianne speak to some of the background data pieces next.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So the practice-based research and learning network model is really an example of a learning health system and something that we're trying to build at NOSM, which is a socially accountable learning health system. And really the meat and potatoes behind that idea is the idea of the learning cycles. So it's collecting the right high quality, meaningful data, turning that data into knowledge, and then applying that knowledge into practice. And so that's really, that's what the Center for Social Accountability is trying to facilitate through the different research programs like North and Merlin. And so a little of how North data and the North model actually facilitates this type of data to knowledge to action learning is illustrated on the slide here. And so we're actually really lucky. So we are what would be considered a regional practice-based research and learning network, but we're also contained within a provincial network. So Poplar, the Primary Care Ontario Practice-Based Learning and Research Network, as well as a national network, the Canadian Primary Care Sentinel Surveillance System. So you see that there are actually six practice-based research and learning networks in Ontario, as well as one that includes the Community Health Centres and Aboriginal Health Access Centres, the Alliance, and nurse practitioner-led clinics as well. And so this sort of embedded learning system, each of these regional networks contribute de-identified electronic medical record to the provincial network, so Poplar. And that's where the data is sort of separated. So we take away the identifiers, and then the analytic data set, which is secure and confidential, that is what's open for research, analysis, and evaluation, as well as quality improvement. However, the identifiers are kept in this safe and secure access location, so that there might be potential, if individual clinicians consent, to do the linkage of that data at a later point. So that's where the ICES institution comes in. As well, again, clinicians have the opportunity to consent to, well, can the de-identified data actually be sent to the national network, as well as some of the other partnering networks, in particular Diabetes Action Canada and the Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research. And this is a really exciting opportunity because we're able to leverage these safe and secure data infrastructure resources at NOSM and provincially, as well as start to build infrastructure so that we can collect patient experience and patient reported outcomes. So that's sort of what's coming up next. Next slide, please. Oh, and I'll turn it back to Barb for this one.
Great. And so this is just an infographic to describe and share sort of how, what be participating in the North Network, some potential, I guess, advantages or things that can happen. So Brienne mentioned how an individual provider's practice data does become part of a larger database that again flows to the provincial and the national databases. So the opportunities that present are in the top left hand of my screen is quality improvement. So there's an opportunity to use your own practice-based research data or practice-based data to ask a quality improvement question using that data. Moving down to the right-hand side of the screen, there's also a chance to ask practice-specific questions that are more research-based, and then an opportunity to access a larger data set if thinking about bigger research questions that would be pan-Canadian or pan-provincial. Finally, one of the things we're trying to do is really build a community of practice when it comes to clinicians being involved in research that feels meaningful. So again, thinking about that, the pillars from the Center for Social Accountability around advocacy, I think sort of many of us who are in clinical practice recognize what health issues are important, and we have questions and so what we're also doing is building a team that can help support answering some of those community-based research questions that folks may have.
And so some of our research areas, actually, you'll notice a lot in common with Merlin and the center, and that's just emphasizing sort of the importance, but the common thread throughout the Center for Social Accountability. So North, our practice-based research and learning network, is really interested in understanding rural, remote, primary healthcare, population health research. So understanding how do models of care or community health profiles differ among Northern Ontario regions or other Northern rural and remote regions. As well, we're really trying to emphasize the patient-oriented and community-oriented research. And so how can we evaluate, for example, the new Ontario Health Team model? There are different implementations of health services, and we can do that in a primary care setting. And as Barb mentioned, one of the big pieces of North is to build capacity and to develop specific capacity in clinical research. And so that might sound familiar in terms of understanding safety, effectiveness, outcomes related to different interventions in a clinical setting. And of course, we actually have this really unique opportunity given NOSM's distributed nature, as well as the Center for Social Accountability's impact focus, to look at how are we doing in terms of medical education and are we being socially accountable? So having primary care practices distributed across the network, we will be able to answer some of those impact questions through the North Network. And Barb.
Yeah, and so as we're moving along, I sort of see what we're doing is we're recruiting practices and clinicians who are interested in participating. We're working on creating our operations and governance, and we're also working on some research projects so that we can start to become nimble with using our database. And so these are some projects that we currently have funded. One is a cancer screening and preventive health services project with the Kenora All Nations Ontario Health Team. We're also have submitted to look at the homeless and structurally vulnerable population in primary care and how healthcare services are delivered to those patients, and how are we managing chronic illness in that subset of a really vulnerable population, which again I think speaks to that social accountability mandate and is a project that was introduced from a community perspective. Again, a community clinician-initiated project is with respect to presentations of anxiety and depression across the COVID-19 timeline. And so that's one that we're really going to dig into our data for the first time with and look at that and see how presentations in youth in particular have changed, if they have indeed changed before COVID and during the COVID timeline. And through all of this, we've identified that Indigenous data and sovereignty are critical to the work that we do. And so we've worked to we've done a survey of all the national networks to see how different networks are incorporating Indigenous data sovereignty principles into the network work that they're doing. And we hope to create some foundational elements that will continue to guide the work that we do, recognizing how critical that is with respect to this this data set.